Instead of making the ship faster, how about installing some seatbelts?
Seatbelts are dead weight. I feel the need for speed.
Yes, but I feel the nafety for safety.
Oh, fuff.
Working on starting to mount the rock lights, sort of the last item in the electrical work here on the TJ. We've gotten a hold of these Shadow Reaper pods from Infinite Offroad. And they're a very traditional sort of surface mount kind of design. The challenge is always, when mounting something like this, that you have to have a flat surface on the Jeep that you're willing to drill holes into to mount them. It's a lot of holes, and in some cases getting to the backside of a hole or putting in a nutsert is really not ideal, and there are some things you just not really ideal to drill into. So we're going to do something a little bit different. There are other alternatives to just drilling a hole and mounting these things. One option, you can get these flexible magnets that have an adhesive backing on the back, and you can cut them with scissors. You can trim them down and make them just exactly the right shape to go on the back of a light pod. What we found is that there just isn't quite enough strength to the magnet itself to be really confident in using these to mount the lights. Another option is this double stick body mounting tape. Now, this is the stuff that they use to attach like the body molding to your vehicle. So it's got a good longevity, good lifespan, and honestly a pretty decent adhesive bond. The biggest problem with these is you need to have a place where the Jeep is flat and the surface that you're trying to attach to is very clean. So no rust, no dirt, no weld scale, or anything like that. And this was actually recommended by Infinite Offroad as one of the options. We're going to work with something slightly different. You can get a hold of these sort of craft magnets from various places. And these are a high strength, neo whatever it is, cup magnet is what they call it. And so you've got the magnet on the inside here, inside a steel backing cup. And they have a nice little hole right through the middle for mounting them to things. So they come with these nice recessed washers, and so they've got the same kind of a recessed hole in here. And the idea is that these can be used for like a door catch or for attaching things. But they're rated at 95 pounds of pull. And actually, even that little bit of overlap between the two takes a fair amount of effort to pop it loose. So I think a couple of these on the back of the light pod is going to be plenty strong. And this is as simple as finding the right size screw and putting it through the hole. But what we're going to do is just put two of these magnets behind the pod, and a quick trip to the hardware store for some nuts and bolts. These do not need to be uber tight. So I'll do just kind of a quick demonstration on how solid this actually is for these just two little magnets. So we have a nice sheet metal sort of surface.
That was a
You
thud.
see that took that out of my hand. And then there is a gap behind them so you can get your fingertips behind the light, which is probably a good thing. is you can peel it off with your hand, but it's on there. I don't think that's going to shake off the Jeep on the trail. And that'll allow us to put these wherever we want them on any steel surface. So your JL with the aluminum body might not work so well. And put them on. The company does make a magnetic mount pod, but it has half the LEDs that these do, and they're currently only available in an RGB version, whereas this is just a plain white. So this will give us more light and a simpler wiring installation. So the whole idea here is that with the magnets, the mounting of these to the vehicle should be really easy. The question now becomes, where do we feel like putting the rock lights? We would like to have them in a place where they are relatively protected and also not in the way. So putting them out here probably is a good lighting source, not such a great scenario for...
I will scrape those off on my first trail run.
So the advantage of the magnets is the position of these things doesn't have to be permanent. We can move them around if we decide that they would work better somewhere else than they are. And in fact can even do some of that on the trail to the extent that of how much play we have in the wiring. As you can see from the wires hanging down, we've got things laid out kind of like how we think we want to do it, with the light under the fender here, up by the body mount over there. We're thinking here on this pinch weld box that's in here, try to put one of these strip lights, ideally, so it'll throw light clear across the back, as well as the hot spots. And on the front, similar idea. Right here behind the body mount, where it's up and recessed a little bit below the slider, so hopefully it won't be too much of a rock target. And then similarly up front, getting it up in front of the tire as best we can, up under the fender. Now, the reason we've got all the wiring hanging loose is the next thing we have to address is Infinite Offroad uses these really nice molded weather-tight connectors. So this isn't a conversation about cutting and splicing the wiring harness. It's a question of how do we put the harness together in the way they wanted it. There is plenty of wire here, for instance, to route this wire from the front light back to the second light, or across the front of the Jeep to the other side. We just need to lay out our wiring harness and figure out what's going to connect to what and how we pull this all together. So let's take a look at what we've got. So this is the remainder of the Infinite Offroad wiring kit. So now this looks like just an extension. These two connectors would go together, a length. This is a 4-direction Y coming off of a fairly typical kind of weather-tight connector there. So this is going to split to 4 different directions. That could go to like 4 different corners of the Jeep, or 4 lights for the rear of the Jeep. That would actually work. You could do that and run all 4 of the rear ones off of something like that. We have another one of those, although now this one's got the other style connector on it. So that one, maybe as a 4 to a 4, or that running length into this one.
I believe there's 2 of those.
And we have another one of those, again, that sort of running length. So, okay. Then we have a section here, and these look like the connectors that go to the strip lights. And this one looks again like an extension, and this kind of looks like an extension, and this looks like an adapter that would go from some of that wiring into this other set of connectors. Now that's the only thing I've seen that goes into those strip lights. Now that's kind of interesting because that implies that we maybe don't have connectors to combine the strip lights in an arbitrary manner. This is another one of these just extenders. And then this presumably is the wiring that they provide to connect to your system. Now this we definitely want to modify because we've got our own relay box and our own switches, so we don't need their relay, we don't need their fuse. That's presumably hot and ground. We come down here and we've got the switch.
I have a switch.
That we want to use our switch. We've got, this is that connector that would match with this, so that kind of determines how that works. And then they have this little box in here that is set up to be a remote control of some sort. So it's got a little antenna, it says flash remote control. We've got an on, off, I'm guessing 1 flash and 2 flash. So if you were building a display rig that you want to sit there and have it set up in the parking lot with a flashing light underneath it, certainly this could be interesting. This is a rock crawler, not a show truck. It's not going to spend a lot of time sitting in parking lots to be just looked at. We're probably not going to wire the flasher into the rock lights. Just not a lot of reason why you would want blinking rock lights under the vehicle for use, but it's there. Maybe we'll find something else you want to use a key fob controlled light system for down the road. The way they intended for this to work then is that power starts here and branches up to 4 directions. We've got to have to think about how we want to do this, because then this would come from our box and then feed out to where we want to go. Working out how we're going to pull the wiring together with the harnesses and the pieces we've got. What we're going to do, since our relay box sits right here where the battery is, we're going to come into the system here with this connector that will splice to match our system. The 3 lights directly connected to this T will be the passenger side front, the passenger side here at the front body mount, and the passenger side here at the, I guess, the rear or the center body mounts. This connector will then be for the passenger or driver's side wiring. So this will go over to the driver's side T. The driver's side T, same thing, 3 lights connected, will be at the very front, here at the forward body mount, and at the rearward body mount. And then we've got 1 branch that will then go to our rear T here. This will have the driver's side and passenger side rear lights connected to it. Now we do have an extension that we can put in between this T and that T if necessary, and another extension we can put in between the driver's side and passenger side branches. If we don't have to use the T's because we've got gobs and gobs and gobs of wire, that would be great. But at the same time, knowing that we've got to get from the back of the vehicle to the front of the vehicle, from the passenger side to the driver's side.
The other way. Driver's side to passenger.
Driver to passenger. This gives us a lot of flexibility, and we'll start pulling wires through and figure out where exactly some of these branches are going to have to live. For the moment, we're probably going to not worry about the strip lights. We're thinking, see how this works. Maybe we'll put the strip lights up under the hood and make for a nice under hood illumination and work at it from that side. And hopefully we've got a branch left over to run them off of. The lovely thing about wiring is always got to route everything into places where it's going to be kept out of the way and tied up. And it's just a lot of little fingers back in tight spots. Easy access to the other side of the frame rail, but this side of the frame rail is easy to get to. Just route it over the top and then tuck it back. So on the front one here, I've got this really nice spot right here for a wire to go inside the fender. So we're going to run this inside the fender along through this space, and it'll meet up with this bundle down there. Mostly just trying to keep track of what's connected where, what's expected to be connected where, and also keep from stepping on and smashing these connectors.
Which we've done once by accident. Thankfully, we didn't step on it too hard. And Kenneth's leaving himself just a little bit of slack so we can adjust the magnetic placement just a little bit, depending on the shadowing we see later.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there isn't a lot of opportunity to really tie zip ties in. They do make a adhesive cable tie, zip tie. Maybe get some of those and stick this to the frame, because where these are just free floating and not attached to anything.
And right next to the exhaust.
Right next to the exhaust is a less than ideal situation.
Pay attention to your wire here. Make sure it doesn't kink as you're pulling it through and damage anything.
And we have Death Wish calling.
Flashie, come here.
So now, this is a little bit of the routing through the engine compartment and deciding is X or Y better. We run most of the wire here along this support beam. Wiring for the compressors and everything else is running right in through here. I'm thinking in through here is going to be better.
Okay.
If you come over here and we look right down there, you can see that there is a hole between the firewall and the battery tray. That's where we're going to bring the wires from this side up, right along the firewall.
This is why I didn't take her off-roading last weekend when I got invited. He would have had mud dripping all over him at that point.
So this is this side, and this bundle will tuck in here, and this will fish underneath once I change out the end. So now, to route the wiring from the passenger, from the driver's side. So following more or less the same path on the passenger or driver's side here.
And giving Penny a great big hug.
Ugh. I'm just trying to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to take these two Ys that we've got, but one plugs directly into the other. I'm just going to tape the bodies together, so that will kind of make all the wiring that comes downstream come together like it's one assembly. That is all of this. And so then all we need to do is clean all of this up.
What about this one?
Now we need to also bring that one in, and then this wire, we'll use one of the extensions to run over to the other side and the other junction.
Kenneth just loves the built-in step stool.
If it works. I'm just working on trying to make this bundle with so many wires and so many connections.
Make it prettiful.
Keep it nice and neat.
So prettiful.
Okay, on this side I've handled the sort of burying the extra length a little bit differently. I've actually kind of folded everything straight out and then tagged it together. The reason for that is that these are all such different lengths, and the memory that's in the wire is different. It was going to be hard to get it to just fold up and be nice. So doing it this way pulls it tight, and then I can just fold the whole wire together, and it all kind of stays in that same spacing. Just makes it a little easier to wind it up when there's so many different lengths. And just like on the other side, I have this big sort of wad that has to be dealt with, that is just going to hang out inside the fender here. So now, just need to run the wire across the top. A few more zip ties and we'll be all done with this. Other connectors. Okay. So those will go to my terminals for my plug.
Not that there's anything wrong with this connector, it's just not the same as what we wired in.
It's not the same as the style we've used for everything else, and again, I could clip the factory harness and retain that connector, but there's no advantage to keeping that connector and then going to my connector, and just fewer connectors is preferable.
Factory. One more switching to.
Checking again. And that's why we check. In this case, it's just a very fine wire. Doesn't quite have the structural integrity to let me push. So just a little bit of a tool to aid in making the contact. Just like that. And lock it in.